You wake up and everyone has disappeared. At exactly 7:03 a.m., Hart woke up. Something felt wrong. The house was completely silent, not normal morning silence, the kind of silence that makes you feel like something is missing. Hart reached for his phone. No messages, no missed calls. Nothing. He called his mother. No answer. He called his best friend. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. Hart got out of bed and walked downstairs. Mom? Silence. Mom? Nothing. He checked every room. The kitchen was empty. The living room was empty. The bathroom was empty. The front door was unlocked. But nobody was inside. Hart walked outside, and that's when he realized something was seriously wrong. The entire neighborhood was empty. No people. No children. No cars moving. No dogs barking. Nothing. Hart stood in the middle of the street. He looked left. Nothing. He looked right. Nothing. Then he noticed something even stranger. Every car had been abandoned. Some were sitting in driveways. Others were stopped in the middle of the road. One car had its door completely open, as if someone had simply disappeared while getting out. Hart pulled out his phone. He opened social media. Nothing new. He opened the news. Nothing. Every news channel was offline. Then, his phone suddenly vibrated. Hart nearly dropped it. One notification had appeared. Unknown number. The message contained only 5 words. Do not go outside tonight. Hart stared at the screen. Who sent it? And how did they know what was happening? He immediately tried calling the number. The call connected, but there was no voice. Only static. Then, a faint whisper. Hart. The call ended. Hart froze. They knew his name. He checked the number. Unknown. He tried calling again. Nothing. Hart decided to leave the neighborhood. He grabbed some food, water, a flashlight, and his backpack. Then he got into his car. The roads were completely empty. Traffic lights continued changing. Red, green, yellow. But nobody was there to see them. Hart drove toward the city. And what he saw made his stomach drop. The city was empty too. Thousands of cars were parked everywhere. Restaurants were open. Stores were unlocked. Traffic lights were working. But there wasn't a single person. Hart walked into a supermarket. Food was everywhere. Fresh bread, fruit, bottled water. Everything was still there. It looked like everyone had simply vanished in the middle of an ordinary day. Hart grabbed supplies. Then he heard something. A noise from the back of the store. He stopped. Hello? No answer. He walked toward the sound. It happened again. A metal shelf moving. Hart slowly approached. Then suddenly, a person stepped out. Hart nearly screamed. It was a woman. A young woman named Emma. She looked just as terrified as he was. You're alive? Hart stared at her. What do you mean? Emma shook her head. I've been looking for someone for hours. Hart asked. Do you know what happened? Emma said, no. But I know something. Hart waited. Everyone didn't disappear at the same time. Hart's expression changed. What? Emma explained that she had been driving when she saw people suddenly vanish. Not everyone. Some people remained. Then, more people disappeared. And eventually, almost everyone was gone. Hart remembered the message. Someone told me not to go outside tonight. Emma looked frightened. Who? I don't know. Suddenly, the lights inside the supermarket flickered. Once. Twice. Then every light went out. Hart and Emma stood completely still, outside. A loud siren started. Then another. Then another. Across the city, emergency alarms began going off. Hart looked through the window. Something was happening in the distance. The sky had turned strangely dark. Not nighttime. Something else. Emma whispered. It's starting. Hart looked at her. What is? Before she could answer, every phone in the supermarket began ringing. Some people remained. Then, more people disappeared. And eventually, almost everyone was gone. Hart remembered the message. Someone told me not to go outside tonight. Emma looked frightened. Who? I don't know. Suddenly, the lights inside the supermarket flickered. Once. Twice. Then every light went out. Hart and Emma stood completely still, outside. A loud siren started. Then another. Then another. Across the city, emergency alarms began going off. Hart looked through the window. Something was happening in the distance. The sky had turned strangely dark. Not nighttime. Something else, Emma whispered. It's starting. Hart looked at her. What is? Before she could answer, every phone in the supermarket began ringing. Hundreds of phones. At exactly the same time, Hart pulled out his phone. A message appeared. This time, it wasn't from an unknown number. It said, "Round 2 begins at midnight." Hart looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. They had 13 minutes. Hart and Emma ran outside. They needed somewhere safe. They found an underground parking garage and locked themselves inside. 11:55. Nothing happened. 11:58. Still nothing. 11:59. Hart stared at the clock. 12 o'clock. The entire city went dark. Every light disappeared. Then, a sound came from above them. Hundreds of footsteps. Hart and Emma looked at each other. People were walking outside. Hart slowly opened the garage door and froze. The streets were no longer empty. Thousands of people were standing there. But something was wrong. They weren't moving normally. They were standing completely still, all facing the same direction. Hart whispered, "What are they looking at?" Then every person in the street slowly turned their heads and looked directly at the garage. Emma grabbed Hart's arm. "Close the door." Hart slammed it shut. A second later, something hit the other side. Boom! Then another. Boom! Hart and Emma backed away. Then Hart's phone vibrated. One final message appeared. "You have until sunrise." Hart stared at the screen. Emma looked at him. What happens at sunrise? Hart didn't know, but somewhere above them, the footsteps had stopped. And that was even more frightening, because now something was coming toward them. The story doesn't end there, because at 5:48 a.m., Hart discovered the truth. The people outside weren't the ones who had disappeared. They were the ones who had been left behind, and the people who disappeared were somewhere else. Hart's phone suddenly received a video. He opened it. The video showed his neighborhood. But it wasn't empty. There were hundreds of people walking around. His mother was there. His friends were there. Everyone who had disappeared was there. But they couldn't see the camera. They were trapped inside what looked like another version of the city. Hart watched in shock. Then the video zoomed in. His mother looked directly toward the camera and whispered something. Hart turned up the volume. Her voice came through the speaker. "Hart, don't come looking for us." The video ended. Hart dropped the phone. He finally understood. The people hadn't disappeared. They had been taken. And whatever took them was still watching. Hart looked at Emma. Emma looked back at him. Neither of them spoke. Then, a new message appeared. "You have been chosen." Hart stared at the screen, and for the first time, he wondered whether waking up alone had actually been the beginning of the problem, or the beginning of something much worse. So here's the question. If you woke up tomorrow and discovered that everyone in the world had disappeared, would you leave your house and search for answers? Or would you stay inside and wait? Tell me what you would do. Welcome to Whisper Vault.